Well, good morning or good afternoon, everybody who is joining us for this Aquitas webinar. We still have a few people logging on, so we're going to get started in just a moment. But in the meantime, I just wanted to thank you all for joining us, and we will get started in probably just about 30 seconds. So stand by, and we'll be rolling. I think we're going to go ahead and get started, folks. So I do see that some people are still logging on, and that's fine. Again, thanks so much for joining us. My name is Mike Smith. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Today's webinar is looking at augmented reality's role in your organization's future, smarter operations and smarter maintenance. This is the first in a series of webinars that we're producing under the banner of Asset Management Excellence in a Data-Rich Environment. So we're excited about this. This is the first one we're doing, and we really appreciate you all joining us today. So let's jump right into it. Today, I'm going to share a few thoughts with you. We've done some research and some background work leading into today's session, particularly as part of the white paper that accompanies this webinar. And most of you all should have seen how to download that. And if you have not, we'll be sending that out to you, the link to you in the follow-up to today's session. Our panelists, and we've got a great group of panelists today, will be making some opening remarks. Then we'll have more of an open discussion. During that open discussion, we encourage you to use the chat to ask any questions. We have a member of our team monitoring the chat. She'll signal me when we have those questions coming in. And if you could also just make sure that your mic is muted. I'm sure we've all, in the COVID and post-COVID world, have been on a number of these virtual meetings where all it takes is one person with a dog barking in the background. So if you could just double check, make sure your mic is muted, that would be great. Then we're going to get into this discussion, which will be great, and then we'll wrap things up. So let's jump in. These are our panelists today. Some of these folks are very prolific in the asset and maintenance management space, as well as in the augmented reality space. So I'm sure you know some of these folks. We're very fortunate to have them on board with us today. We'll be introducing each of them when they make their opening remarks in just a few minutes. Since augmented reality is a newer topic, we wanted to just kind of set the table and have a few data points so we all have a common reference point as we talk about this. So I'm not one to read slides, and by the way, we will be sending PDFs of these slides out to all of today's attendees, but this is just something to give you an idea of kind of how augmented reality is defined in the industry. And I think one of the key points here is that it incorporates both real world elements as well as virtual elements versus something that's more virtual or purely a simulation. And we'll look at different ways people are using that today's webinar. How is this different from virtual reality? And again, I think that's one of the big differences is AR is really in a real world setting, and you'll see, and we'll discuss examples of what that looks like. VR typically requires some sort of a headset or similar device, whereas AR can be accessed with maybe a smartphone or a tablet, or even some of these newer devices that are coming out now. And I think Apple just announced a new device as well. So just a quick story about augmented reality. In the research we did, this was the earliest sign of what we could find of where this came about. This was at Harvard in 1968, so it's almost as old as I am, and it's been around for a while, but it's becoming more and more a part of how we live and work. Another example that I think a lot of you have probably seen are what many pilots call these heads-up displays, where they're looking at different data that's going to help them in a real-time, very real-time way with their flights and flight operations. And of course, the yellow first down marker for football. I'm also old enough to remember what it was like before we had this, and I can't imagine watching football without this now. So AR in your everyday life is a happening thing. AR, as I think we all know, that it's a growing technology market space. We looked around at some different data points, and I think we'll be talking about this as we get deeper into today's session, but the growth is very significant. 40% growth through 2030 is more than significant. It's exploding, and I think there's good reason for that, and I think we'll be discussing some of that today. This is interesting about where AR is today and where it's coming online, and this came through in some of the interviews we did for the research for the white paper in today's session, as well as some of the things we read when we did some online secondary research. is those target users are typically millennials or even younger, which would be, I guess, Gen Z, where they're just used to having technology at the ready. A lot of them are gamers. Their life is very gadget centric. So as the older workforce, the baby boomers, and I guess it's Generation X starts to transition out, the new folks coming in are more tech savvy and they kind of expect this. So it's not only good for some of the things like asset and maintenance management operations and knowledge capture and some of those things to capture some of that as it's going out the door. But on the other end, having that ready for this new folks that come in that really expect it. So that's going to help you with employee retention and hiring great people. These are some of the leading use cases. I'm sure this is kind of mom and apple pie for everyone, but these are the areas where a lot of the early use cases have been very successful. We'll talk today about, especially about those first two around manufacturing and maintenance and repair, and I think we've all seen examples in some of these other markets as well. So let's jump in and start hearing from the panelists. So first, let me introduce Wayne Edwards, and he's going to make his opening remarks here in just a minute. I know many of you know Wayne. He's very well known in the space and very prolific. So let me just tell you a little bit about Wayne and his background. Wayne is an augmented reality specialist for PTC. He has over 30 years of experience where he specializes in helping enterprises deploy AR solutions to accelerate the time to proficiency for their frontline workforce. Wayne has spent his career helping companies in various industries to improve business performance through digital transformation. So Wayne, the floor is yours, and just let me know if I'm keeping up on the slides. You there,
Fantastic,
Wayne?
thanks. Yes, sir. So yeah, I'm gonna just really get 3 points here in my introduction here. One, just from my point of view of working mostly in industrial manufacturing settings and field service settings, what are some of the challenges that we see that I'm trying to address with every day? And more importantly, how can augmented reality help? There are different ways to solve these challenges, but I'm going to specifically point out a couple ways that AR will help. We'll take a quick look at some of the use cases that we deal with. Snapshot of what some of the industry analysts are saying that are the benefits that have already been documented and that you can expect. Next slide, please. The one thing that I really like the most about augmented reality in my career is really being able to tap into helping those critical, valuable assets within your organizations, your people, the frontline workforce. Many digital transformation projects and investments have been going on over the last several years, but the frontline workforce has really been kind of the last frontiers to be able to address technology on the frontline workforce. If we can look at the next slide, we'll see exactly some of the business challenges that we are trying to address. So as been stated today, there's a lot of knowledge in people's heads that are in the workforce today that are kind of leaving the workforce. And so traditional training methods have been really that you onboard a new person, maybe you give them some paper-based SOPs or work instructions, you really put them with a mentor and they really try to learn that from that process. And as Mike stated earlier, the generational workforce coming out today just really doesn't learn that way. And quite honestly, most of us today, if we tend to go to a YouTube or some other medium. So there's a major challenge with the workforce that people are attracting today, that they may have a different skills gap compared to the traditional workforce. And so there's just a lot of challenges that in really trying to onboard people. So I'm really going to focus on the next slide here to kind of give you 3 areas that I see how AR can really help address these challenges. The first one is that people have been investing a lot of time and resources in putting together standard operating procedures or work instructions. And so one thing that we have been able to benefit from is being able to leverage augmented reality to actually capture the knowledge from the frontline workforce themselves. So we can take the knowledge from someone's head in the context of video. We can take the knowledge in the context of a 2D or 3D asset and really put that into a structured document. And what we have identified is that we can actually create better content than traditional methods and actually do it a lot faster. So that's one of the value props that you see that really helps with the challenge around the retiring workforce. Now that we have this digital library of these better work instructions that in a more modern medium, being able to use this content to help someone learn that if I can actually best represent the job that I'm about to see in a more step-by-step, more immersive type of situation. So prior to a couple of years ago, AR really had a foothold in the training department, learning and development, learning the job. But now these work instructions are highly intelligent, where we can collect data while you do the job. So for example, of an inspection use case, we can collect data while you're doing a pass-fail. We can take pictures as evidence. So what you're seeing now is that the AR procedures are more effective, not only just for learning the job, but also while you're doing the job. So these are some of the use cases that we see happening out there, whether you're in the factory or on the floor, really any type of work instruction you can think about from a production operations or quality control, maintenance and services. So these are really some of the high areas. But if you think about a factory or workers out in the field for going out to repair equipment or do installations, I mean, really any type of procedure you can think about is viable options today. So on the next slide, I'll just give you a quick representation of maybe what some of these procedures look like in the context of AR. Next slide, please. So in the area of maintenance and diagnostics, obviously today's world, with AR, we can overlay digital content on top of the physical, as you've seen with the yellow line on the football field. But here, even more so with complex assets like these pieces of equipment, we can overlay digital 3D content that you can see to overlay step by step of how to do an assembly or a disassembly or a maintenance and repair procedure. You also can incorporate IoT or OE data so that as you walk through a factory or look at a piece. So this is really combining digital intelligent information in the context of the physical world from a phone or from a tablet or from a hands-free device. And what you're seeing on the right is really a quality inspection procedure with AI built into it. So the computer vision now look at the step in the process, determining is it correct. If it's incorrect, you see the red X there, it's on fail. As you make the correction, the software can guide you with assistance to tell you that it is correct. So really much more visual, as you see here, much more immersive and much more real time. And that's a key point. I think the last slide here, we're going to show you just that there are a lot of benefits that have already been reports out there available. I have one that we could also send to you as well. If you look at the benefits in the area of manufacturing and service benefits, there are really hard dollar and soft dollar savings that are to be gained. In the upper right hand corner, if you notice that too, that there are a lot of companies with strategies that are developing AR technology now to really improve their business operations. So it's a real exciting time to be in this space. The technology is certainly matured and it is really in a good space to get started if you haven't started already. Thanks, Mike.
Great. Well, thanks, Wayne. That's a great way for us to get started. And again, I'll encourage the audience to think about questions you want to ask or even comments you'd like to make in the chat. And a member of our team is watching for that. So we will drive on to our next speaker, or rather panelist, and his opening remarks. It's Raj Kamela from Ashley Furniture. And let me just tell you a little bit about Raj. Raj is the VP of IT Manufacturing and Innovation at Ashley Furniture, where he leads the development and deployment of solutions using IT, robotics, machine learning and AI, and augmented reality to improve quality and productivity. He has more than 20 years of manufacturing experience in high-tech electronics and aeronautics. As a technologist, he has been introducing cutting-edge technology to the manufacturing floor throughout his career. And not surprisingly, his hobbies are designing custom electronic hardware, robots, and automated equipment. So Raj, thanks again for joining us today. And the floor is yours. I'm going to bump forward to here where you can tell us what you'll be covering.
Thanks, Mike. I'll be talking about the practical implementation aspect of the AR, right? So obviously, what Wayne gone through in his slide deck, there are a lot of good use cases. This technology is amazing. You use it the right way, and if you implement it the right way, right? There is a lot of ROI. There is no question about that. So I want to cover the aspects what we need to focus on if we're gonna embark on this journey. So as an organization, what do you need to prepare for, right? So let's start with the first one, the reason for AR, Mike. So implementing this actually applies for any technology, right? Implementing AR shouldn't be the end goal, right? So the goal should be using technology to improve your metrics, whether it is quality or productivity or whatever it is. So that's what we need to keep in mind. How do we assess what's the right use case for your organization? Right? Not every organization built the same way. So identifying those reasons is going to be the key for the success. And also, initiatives should align with the availability of the relevant information. So, when talked about OEE and IoT and other information, or even if it is a 3D model or 2D model, things like that. So, are we prepared to support that kind of content so that we can leverage these technologies, right? If you don't have that information available, then you cannot really benefit from the technology itself. So setting that expectation for the stakeholders is very important, because just because you bought AR glasses and brought in a vendor to do an implementation is not going to give you the success you want, right? So even if you're not thinking about AR right now, if you're going to implement in 6 months or 1 year or maybe later, but we need to start thinking about now how to prepare for it, right? So that's what I'm kind of talking about in terms of when we're talking about the reasons. Let's do it for the right reasons, and technology is going to catch up. It's already caught up, right? There's a huge set of applications and devices available out there. So adapting that to your use case needs to be methodical. And as we do this, we need to bring our business partners. It's not just a technology thing, right? So the business needs to buy into this. So make sure that we're setting the right expectations for them and have that backing that we need. So let's go to the next slide, Mike. So as I mentioned, the content is a big thing. So without the right content, what are we going to augment with, right? So we need to think about what kind of content is going to be useful for what scenario. So are we talking about instructions? If how is that going to be developed? How is that going to be managed and delivered? And if we're talking about IoT and ERP data, do we have that connectivity, right? So sometimes you might have data out there in your ERP system and in IoT systems, but a simple thing like network segmentation from a cybersecurity point of view, get in the middle, right? So you need to be prepared from an infrastructure point of view as well to deliver the content that you might already have to these devices, right? So, and then accountability, who's going to manage in this content? Because once you launch this kind of initiative, and if you don't do the upkeep, right, within 6 months, if we're not updating the content and if there's no workflow and rigor around that, then the whole thing is going to fall apart, right? So that's another thing we need to make sure that content ownership and management is addressed ahead of time. Next slide, please. And Mike mentioned about devices. Apple is going to release one, right, to the public market next year. There are already a lot of devices out there, and we used a few of those. So we need to make sure that we identify the right device, whether it is a AR glasses or a tablet or whatever it is. We need to make sure that it fits the need and it fits for the right environment. And also, we need to keep in mind the life cycle and security implications of these devices, right? So the vendor base for these devices is pretty small right now. That means they're not going to move as fast as, if, for example, if we take a tablet world, right? So as you, for example, if you take an Android version upgrade, that happens every year, but this hardware might not be getting the same update at the same frequency. So how is that going to impact your security profile, right? Those are the kind of things kind of slow down your implementation. Even if you have the need for AR and you have the means to do it, if you don't plan for these things, you're going to get into those roadblocks. And also simple things like device management, physical security of the device. Because sometimes, let's say, you're planning to use these devices for troubleshooting purposes. So you're not going to troubleshoot every day, right? So you're going to troubleshoot when there is a trouble, right? So that means you need to have the device charged up and updated and ready to use when you need it. So how can you make sure that device is charged up? It's a simple thing, right? But if you don't take care of those simple processes, you're not going to get the value out of it, right? It's a simple problem to solve, but we need to think about those things, right? So that's what what I want to talk about on this slide. And Mike, let's go to the next slide. I think it froze. Yeah, sorry. So adoption, right? So developing a comprehensive training program on how to use this technology, whether it's a device or content creation, like Wayne mentioned, new tools with AR suits have better content management and content authoring tools available than the traditional content authoring tools. So we need to train people ahead of time and make sure that they understand how to use these tools. Also, change management, address the resistance to change by communicating the benefits and involving employees in the decision making, right? A lot of times with newer technologies, you see that resistance saying, this is going to get in my way, right? If I'm going and repairing a machine, wearing a headset might actually get in the way, right? But if we approach it the right way and from a security perspective and safety perspective, that can be changed. So, and providing that ongoing support and feedback channels to encourage how the adoption is continuing to happen, and also assess what the problems we're dealing with, right, from adoption perspective, and change as we go. Let's go to the next slide, Mike. Thank you. So, like any other project, right, this is a lot of this stuff I'm talking about is not specific to AR, right? I think everybody on the call realize that. But the reason I am talking about this rather than technology is most of the time, this is what makes or breaks any technology implementation, right? So defining proper metrics and ROI and making sure that we are tracking to it, right, is very important. So and building that feedback mechanism to make sure that we're still adding that value we thought we're adding at the beginning of the project, right? So if we're not doing that, maybe it will work well for the first 6 months or 12 months, and then it's going to start deteriorating, right? So it's constant loop of getting the feedback, measuring the ROI and metrics, and staying on top of it is going to be the key for the success. Thanks, Mike.
Great, and I think that was your last one. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Raj. That was great. And you may have seen me taking a few notes, and definitely have some questions for Wayne and Raj as we move forward. But first, we want to hear from Michael Hayes, and let me introduce you to Michael before he jumps in deep here. As the Director of Development and Lab Services at Aquitas, Michael brings 28 years of product development, systems integration, technical instruction, and leadership experience. For the last 20 years, he has worked with the IBM Maximo product. Prior to joining Aquitas, Michael was in a senior solution architect role at IBM, and he came to IBM through their acquisition of MRO Software back in 2006. While at IBM, Michael was the lead architect for many of IBM's Smarter Planet solutions. He was also a lead architect for other IBM Smarter Solution products for the chemical and petrochem, aerospace, utilities, and transportation solution spaces. Since joining Aquitas, Michael has continued architecting and leading both the Maximo and the IoT development teams for IoT solutions and added functionality for Maximo for advanced condition-based monitoring processes and integration. Michael completed his BS in computer science from Brigham Young University in Utah. And Michael, the floor is yours.
Michael, you're on mute.
Yeah. You there, Michael?
I put myself on mute. Why does that happen? I owe myself another $10. So
no worries.
Yeah. So, but thank you, Mike. We just have this one slide today, and a reason why I have this, really this one slide is it kind of it's everything that Wayne and Raja talked about, but from a Aquitas as an implementer, we work with and partner with people like Wayne and also with like Raj as our customers. And I'd like to say that we are partners with even our customers, because we're there to make a success. It is just as important for us to be successful with our customers as it is to be successful as they want to be successful. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up here, and Raj brought up a lot of those points within the methodology of really having a successful implementation. Because when you look at AR, it's new. And it can be a little overwhelming at times in looking at how do we implement this, and what are we going to do, and that's where we kind of come in from an Aquitas perspective to kind of help with that. And what we do is we go through this methodology where we have to plan, you set up, then we do the capturing of the information, just as Raj, then we execute, and then we deploy. And some of the most important parts that I wanted to really define here, and some of the pain points that we've noticed that as we implement this in customers, is really around one, as part of planning. Sure, Raj mentioned that earlier in his presentation about, sure, we could go out, we can get these AR devices, but then how do we really use them? And do we really, and how do we implement them and we're successful? And one of the things is really just defining and really defining those use cases of which use case is really going to give us our early low-hanging fruit successful basically successful implementation of the solution. And the reason why that is very important is that next one. It says building excitement in this technology, because as Wayne was talking about as well, we have an aging workforce, and as new employees come on, and the next generation, the millennials and et cetera, that are coming on, they already have a little bit of excitement on this. But the point of the matter is that if we do not get everyone in the company, all the way from those who are going to be using it, middle management, and the executives excited about this, basically the implementation is going to really, it's going to be great during the honeymoon phase, but after the honeymoon phase, it's going to kind of dwindle down. And that's what we have seen. We go in, we help look and find what we call the people who are going to be our champions in the customer, to really champion this and really help to build excitement and to build in confidence in the solution. Some of the other pain points, as Raj mentioned, is choosing the right augmented reality device. As he mentioned, that is a very important, depending upon the use case. We might need to use different ones, whether it's a wearable device or whether it is just a phone or a tablet. These are the things that we need to plan and look at. And also, as far as helping with that, creating those use cases is basically build a storyboard. That's one of the other areas. When you're building use cases, it becomes very important to build a storyboard and follow that and break it down into smaller steps. Because how many of us have even just to put in a voice message on our phones? How many times have we gone in and did our voice message, we rehear it, and then we're like, oh, I didn't like that. So you redo it, and you redo it, and you redo it. And this is something as simple as just a hello message on your answering machine. Now think about taking a complete use case where we're going through and showing procedures on how to do maintenance or an inspection. You can imagine that it can be very daunting, and in some cases, if you don't break things down, some of the pain points we've seen is that you get discouraged. And so it becomes very important. And these are some of the things that we help to train and to help you as a customer to do that. And then again, once we get to the setup, one of the things that we like to move forward with is the actual capturing. And this is where we needed to say, take time and review the storyboard before you start your recordings, and then also record one step at a time. Take each step, look at it, review it, redo it if you need to. I keep thinking, especially in this, it's like, one of those in the movies you have, take one, take two, take three. Absolutely, take as many times as you need to, and record them, and get familiar not only with the device, but get familiar with how to best tell the story of how to do the activity that you want to do, and take time in doing this. And this is the part that really um, can really help a AR type experience to really be successful, or or it may not. It can really kind of break that if we don't do these steps appropriately. And then the next phase is executing. Now that we have started to do this, is to start looking and anticipating your resources and the needs of the resources. It kind of goes back to, again, who are we doing this? Who's going to be using it? And that includes those that are going to be possibly training. It could be those that are actually on the floor doing maintenance, and as well as resources on expanding your IT. And Raj talked about that. We need to bring IT into this from a securities perspective, and to find out all of the different needs that are needed. If we have remote areas, how are we going to handle that? These are all the different types of things that we need to look at when we are executing a implementation in AR. But again, if you look at all these different steps, they are very similar to how you would implement any new product or any new thing that you may need to do in your company. And then lastly is deploy. Deploying this is where we really need to create a plan of how we're going to roll this out. Sometimes it can be you have a tendency, we want to roll it all out at once, but maybe it's more of a trickle. It really kind of depends upon the maturity level within your organization of how quickly you want to roll this out. And that's what makes it really important, is that fact that we really need to have a plan and work with a implementer and company like I said, with Aquitas, working with PTC, and also working with other successful companies that have already implemented this to help you to actually go about implementing something of this nature. One of the things, and it may be a question that we're going to ask in a little bit later, is basically what are some of the use cases or specific companies. One would be, we have noticed that in two different areas that we have found that companies start off first, some of those low-hanging fruit. And one particular has to do with, and can't mention her name at the moment, but it's an automotive company that has two areas. One area is around warranty, and the other one is also around doing recalls through when we get recall notifications. And what they're using AR for in both of those, one is use case there has to do with warranty, is in this particular scenario, what was sometimes happening is that a customer would bring their car in, the technician would go through and say, oh, you know what, it looks like that this particular problem has to do with this one sensor, or let's say it's a fuel pump. And that fuel pump, they say they go and replace it. Well, they find out that the problem really wasn't the fuel pump, but it was actually something else within the fuel distribution and supply. And maybe it was the filter or whatever the case may be. And so they replaced the wrong thing under warranty, which cost the manufacturer of the car money, because they pay the dealerships to pay that to do that work. So, because what happens under warranty, things like that, they actually turn those particular items back into the, in this case, the automotive manufacturer, and they take a look at it of why did it fail, why did it fail within the warranty period. And they're finding that a lot of these things were not broken, but they were. And it came down to using AR to help the technicians to diagnose problems better. And they are able to bring that warranty cost down, which is really huge. The other one has to do with, like I said, with service bulletins. With service bulletins, once they decide that there is a problem and there's a bulletin that comes out and it needs to be fixed, Right now, what they're doing and have in the past is that it comes along with just an email and says, here, you know, these are the procedures. You can print them out or they can read them in their email, but it's a written paper that says this is a procedure that you need to do in order to replace or fix this particular issue under the TSB issue. And so what they're doing now is they can actually present this kind of stuff in an AR type of experience. And now we know for sure that there's no level of interpretation on how to do something, but it's also quickly to be able to get out to the dealerships. They can do it that way too. Now the technicians can actually be guided through an AR experience in how to fix something that was in a recall. So those are just some of the experiences, Mike. I think we're about ready to move to some questions.
You are correct, Michael, and thanks so much to you and Wayne and Raj as well. And we are going to open up to a panel discussion. I'll remind our audience, if you do have any questions or comments or anything you'd like to share with the group, please feel free to put that in the chat, and a member of our team is monitoring this. I have about 500,000 questions to ask you guys based on some of the prep we did and some of the things you talked about this morning. So I'll jump in with a couple, but again, please feel free to hit that chat and we'll make sure that we incorporate your questions and comments into the discussion. Raj, I wanted to ask you a question, and this is a little bit reflective of some of the things you talked about today, as well as some of the things we discussed in the run-up to this. You talked about how the technology is not the goal. You don't want to do technology just for technology's sake, and I think we would all agree with that. But there may be a bit of a gap, or maybe even a chasm between understanding the technology and getting to those business goals. And one of the things that you have shared with us in the run-up to this is how you spend a lot of time with your business leader peers, getting them, I don't know if buy-in is the right term, but certainly getting them to partner with you on some of these newer technology initiatives like AR. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I think that our attendees today are probably a mix of folks from the business side as well as technologists. And one of the things that you've been focusing on is how you meld those two together organizationally as well. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. So definitely, whenever we try to bring in new technologies, right, the right education needs to happen, right? So you kind of covered the differences between AR and VR, right? Some people might still have might not have a clear understanding what the difference is, right? So those are the kind of things that we need to kind of go over with your business partners, understand what these technologies are and what can and cannot do. So for example, if we take, we cannot simply say AR is going to give you the real-time information on OEE, right? That's not the right thing to say. What we should be saying is, using AR, if you have a way to show OEE, you can do that better, right, in real time, so that the associate doesn't need to go and look at yet another device, right? So that's the kind of framing that we need to go through with our business partners and operational leaders and even associates to really make sure that they understand and be able to make that distinction between those two pieces of information, right? So that's what we've gone through with our business partners and stakeholders, and it's a journey, and we're in a good spot right now where everybody understands what this technology is going to do for us, and we are working towards creating the right content and doing the organizational change that we need to change to facilitate this, right? And the other piece is, you know, if you see it in action, right, that speaks volume, right? So doing experimentation is simple POC and showing the value of the technology and identify the gap between you have the technology, you have the content, how do you bridge that, right? How do you bring that content into this technology? What kind of roadblocks there might be from an infrastructure point of view, right? From a security point of view, connectivity point of view, like Michael mentioned, right? So those are the kind of things that will surface through those conversations. And based on that, you can really assess, are we ready as an organization to embark on this journey, right? If you're not, what do we need to do to get ready, right? Before we start bringing in vendors and start putting together a project plan. So that's how we approached, and I hope that answers your question, but it's going to be a continuous process.
You did answer it, and I got 3 takeaways. One is show it in action, so you're kind of a salesman, right?
Yep.
The second is to recognize and act on that organizational change. Otherwise, you're just throwing technology at the old problem. And the third one that you started out with, actually, so I'm doing these in reverse order, but I think was perhaps the most important, is making sure your business partners understand what the technology can and cannot do. So you're managing expectations. I think we've probably all seen examples of where there's a set of expectations that really aren't aligned with the reality of the solution. And I think that's spot on. So that I appreciate that. And I think that was a great way to kick off the discussion. Thank you, Raj. I did have another question I want to open up actually to both Michael and Wayne. And this is reflective of some of the things they discussed in their opening remarks, as well as some of the things we discussed in the run-up to today's session. One of the things that has come up in my discussion with Wayne previously was this idea of how a lot of times he's finding and working with his clients that AR is brought to the table much later in, say, a project or a technology implementation's life cycle, where I'm not saying AR is an afterthought, but it hasn't been incorporated as part of the core project from day one, and how that can cause problems. And when I looked at Michael with his plan, set up, capture, execute, deploy, that made me think, I think there's some things that folks that are with us today should hear about in terms of why is that important to be not only thinking AR early, but incorporating that into your technology or your project or your business planning. So Michael or Wayne, could you maybe comment on that a little bit?
Sure, let me start, and then I'll let Wayne kind of add a little bit. Absolutely, I'm just trying to look at how that. I'm trying to get my words on how that this would be the best way to describe it. I think that starting early, and I see that in the future, and I think that we're talking in the real near future, we're going to start seeing OEM for, especially around pieces of equipment, et cetera, actually offering AR experiences for doing inspections and maintenance on their equipment. That's not necessarily happening today, but I think that we don't have to do it later. It's going to come with, because today, what do we have today? So when a customer purchases an asset, let's just, a motor or whatever the case may be, we get the specifications, the OEM, we actually get the manual, and the manual's in paper form a lot of times, or it's in PDF form, and you're looking at that manual and saying, okay, these are the recommended things. Well, I see within the really near future that AR is going to be accompanied with your new thing, or your new asset, and that's really going to make a big difference. So now, instead of it being an afterthought, it's going to be the main part of, from day one, that you implement that, whatever the asset may be. It's going to be part of your maintenance program. It's going to be part of your manufacturing and your processes. It's going to be integral to everything. And we're starting to see that a little bit. So even though OEMs haven't started that, we're starting to see some newer customers, as they're building new plants, that they're starting to say, well, let's do that ourselves, and let's create these AR experiences, and now, so that we can have them for, even though it's a brand new piece of equipment or brand new plant, we're starting to see customers go that direction. Wayne, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, keep in mind too, all procedures are not equal, right? Some things have a greater impact to the business if they're done wrong, right? If I make a bad batch of a product that cannot be reworked, I have to scrap it, therefore it has a critical impact. So I tend to think about the procedures themselves of not being equal, like where should you start, kind of mindset, and start where it has impact to the business, but not necessarily detrimental if you do it wrong. Leverage the technology too. There are components of it that are pretty straightforward. I like the word Raj used, that are pretty practical, right? Be practical in getting started so that you don't, learn something quick and then there. So just be practical, understand, learn the technology, learn the application to the business and to the use case, and you'll be very successful.
Great. Thanks, Wayne. And Wayne, I'm going to stay with you because I wanted to ask you something that we've talked about before. And all of our speakers, and Wayne, especially you opening up with your opening remarks, talked about use cases, and you gave some great examples there. Are there some either specific use cases or maybe use case characteristics where you could see, there's like a pre-AR world and a post-AR world, or an AR world where it's been a real game changer? Are there some that have just really accelerated, the learning curve, the productivity, the effectiveness, the ROI? Can you give a couple examples of what that looks like?
Yeah, I think a good example is really if you look at how you're onboarding people today or how people are learning the job, usually they're highly reliant on mentors, right? So, and your mentors are your folks with the experience and knowledge on the factory floor. They have a lot of knowledge. So I would tend to look at use cases where it's putting a strain on your valuable resources of your, create work instructions in those areas. And it could be, how to do maintenance procedures on the factory floor. It could be just in, setup and changeover procedures. So, every industry is a little bit different, but, whether it be, certainly in the factory for machine operations, or how to do setups and changeovers, or maintenance procedures, or, repairs in the field, there's really not a right or wrong answer about where you should start. It's really got to be associated to some business value, right? Where does it impact the business? Where are you feeling the pressure within your business as it relates to either people to start, because of, you get the benefit of not only using the inspections for learning the job, but doing the job. Today, in most companies, the inspection process, whether it be inline or end of line inspection or maintenance inspection, are very paper-based, or they're visual in general. There's no documentation that someone actually did the inspection. What data did they collect? So that tends to be a really nice place to zero in on if you're having a quality issue, or if you just want to take a process that could be digitized very rapidly, very easily, and have a great impact. Because while you're performing the task of using the digital AR procedure. And that's a benefit that many people may not think about. The AR technology has the ability to document who did the procedure, how long did it take, what data did they collect. You actually have the evidence that something was actually done. And today's world, that's very manual. That's something that quite honestly may not be done regularly. It's more of a afterthought, but I think that's a great area to focus on if you have an issue with quality or just inspections in general.
Yeah, that's a great example, and capturing that in real time is a game changer. Raj, let me come back to you. And you talked a lot about what's going on at Ashley Furniture and kind of your role in all of that. But I would guess that you're kind of like the chief technologist, if that's the right term to use. And I would imagine as you move forward with some of these AR initiatives, there's going to be some challenges, and you touched on some of those. But can you share maybe what you've come across that has been maybe a larger hurdle, or a higher hurdle, or maybe a recurring theme that organizationally you have to work on? And of course, this is very technology centric, but I'm sure there are other things that are maybe more process or organizational in nature. Can you maybe share an anecdote or two about where you've had these challenges that you've run into? So maybe that's a heads up for our audience today.
Yeah, definitely. So change management is the key, right? So that's where we continue to struggle, right? We're making a lot of progress, but still there are a lot that we can improve on. So I can give you an example, right? It's a very kind of silly example, but it kind of makes the point. I kind of mentioned that earlier as well. So we deployed a couple of AR glasses, headsets in multiple locations across the US, primarily for troubleshooting. And we have a lot of automated equipment across our facilities, but we don't have highly technical skill set in every location for every type of machine, right? So it's kind of remote diagnostics kind of thing that we could do with AR glasses. That's the right use case, right? It's the very valuable capability to have. But where we failed is not with the technology, not with the content or connectivity, but because we haven't used those headsets on day in and day out. When we really need it, are they operational, right? So are they charged up? Did they get a security update and that broke something, right? So those are the silly things that we deal with in IT day in and day out, right? So we benefited from from these devices 60% of the time, right? 40% of the time the device is not ready to be used when we really needed it. So is that the failure of AR technology? No, right? That's the distinction I'm trying to make. It's not the failure of technology and AR technology. It's the lack of process in place, right? To make sure that those devices are ready when you need it. So if you don't have the capability to establish that process, then the organization is not ready for investment into AR, right? Or any other technology for sure, right? So that's where we've been hit multiple times. That's just one example, right? With any technology, especially with these devices. And when we're talking about on a busy manufacturing floor, a lot of things will happen, right? And the devices get damaged if you don't have a process in place to get those repaired. Now, what the message we're sending it to the associates is, you're gonna use these devices when you have it, when they're available. If they don't, then you need to fall back on a backup plan, right? That's not a good user experience, right? So if you're going to promote a technology to be used to increase productivity and quality, you make sure that those devices and technologies are available all the time. Otherwise, associates will lose faith in the technology, in the program, and eventually they will stop using it even if they're available, right? Because they cannot, they don't have that trust that it's going to be there every time I need it. So these are the things that we need to focus on. That's what we've been struggling with. We've made great progress. So we're taking very cautious approach, right? So we haven't scaled to the level that we wanted to scale because we want to address all these things, right? From a technology point of view, I think we're in good shape. But from a change management and process management and how you make sure that it keeps happening day in and day out, that's where we're putting a lot of work.
Yeah, that's a great example, and it reminds, I think, a lot of us on the session today of, you look at an asset management implementation or a system implementation, and man, it can do all these great things, and it's very, very high speed, low drag, and everyone's enamored with it. But there's some basic blocking and tackling you have to do, like it's maybe it's getting your data right, or in this case, it's that device management piece, and boy, just that basic blocking and tackling can't be lost, particularly when the sands are shifting a little bit. So that was great. I'm keeping an eye on the clock here, and I do want to ask a question to our entire panel. I like to call this my crystal ball question because we have some really smart people with us today, so I like to take advantage of that. When you step back and you look at how folks are using augmented reality today and all the different use cases we've talked about, and the technology benefits as well as the technology hurdles and change management and process management, what do you think AR in the workplace will look like, say, 5 years from now? So I'll ask each of you that question, and if you can just, give me a 1 minute answer, maybe that would be great. So Wayne, I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I think as we know, the workplace is a space, right? So I do think that this technology is going to be more adapted to the space that we work within, and by that I mean we're going to be able to see this digital information in the context of the space that we're working in. So on the factory floor, in the field, the equipment will become more intelligent and the space will be more intelligent, meaning that we can put digital content in space. Now, the challenge is being able to consume that content in space. The biggest challenge, I think, opportunity we see for improvement is when the devices become to be this size here, that I can see this digital content in context of the space. Then I think this will be a standard method of AR in the workplace. So I think that within 5 years that the devices will catch up to the software. I think today the software is ready to go. And I think we'll see a lot of leap jumps, as you kind of mentioned. Apple just got into the game a week or two ago. And if you think about cell phones, they didn't get into the game 2007, and today everybody has one. So I just think the device strategy is going to 5 years, which make AR kind of a standard technology deployed within the workplace today, that wherever you go, whoever you are, you will have the right information you need to do your job safely, work correctly, proficiently. That's my hope and desire as a software guy. Let's go devices. I'm pulling for you.
Great, great. You just described kind of a workplace nirvana. So I hope we get there too. Raj, what's your crystal ball telling you?
I think I feel this very similar to what Wayne just shared. I think it could be much faster because from a device management, from a device capabilities perspective, one of the key things that AR needs is localization, right? Ability to recognize the objects on what it is saying, right? That's how you can overlay content at the right location in the field of view. And with all the latest LLMs and computer vision AI models that released in the last 6 months, for example, the SAM from Meta, right? So segment anything model is going to be a game changer for AR, right? So for the device manufacturers, it's going to be a day and night. If you compare with the capabilities that they have today in terms of doing that localization on a video feed to what they can do with these new models. So I wouldn't be surprised within a couple of years that you have the right hardware to pair with the software that Wayne mentioned that we already have, right? So I'm betting on a little more aggressive roadmap than 5 years, I would say.
Okay, all right. Another vote for hardware. And Michael, maybe you can wrap up. Tell us what do you see as AR moves forward in the workplace?
I see this. I'm not sure if it'd be 5 years or 10 years, but my crystal ball, I would have to say, is I think that we're going to see the younger generations for sure. I think that higher education, AR in colleges are going to be more prolific, and being able to even see things from a digital twin. We always hear that term, digital twin, and being able to take things and be able to look at the world almost in a digital way. Now, from a manufacturing, especially I think from a maintenance perspective, I really think that that's going to really help, because today what we have a lot of huge maintenance crews that are doing just general rounds. I mean, they're just going around with clipboards in some cases and doing measurements and et cetera. And as Wayne talked about, as not only is the equipment itself is becoming smarter, and I mentioned also where OEMs are creating AR experiences and bringing them with them, but AR can actually begin to actually where that some of that initial inspections or initial viewing of how the asset is doing can be done even more remotely now. So it gives more time. I think it's going to give more time back to those maintenance and reliability engineers to actually help to fine tune what production is doing, rather than always checking and making sure nothing breaks. So I see AR as really being integral as part of the whole manufacturing process, from, like I said, again, from purchasing to the purchasing of the asset, to actually maintaining the asset, to actually operating the asset, and that all those things are even going to cause the asset to have more longevity, and it's really going to drive, hopefully costs down for manufacturing products. And then again, as the young people start coming in, they're automatically going to be able to be productive rather than having to try to learn and from the older crew and getting some of that tribal knowledge, because we're trying to take that tribal knowledge and put it into a digital form so that it is actually currently available to even new folks as they come in.
Great, great. Well, we are again at the top of the hour, so I'm going to thank our panelists, Great insights. For our audience, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to meeting with you again soon. Thank you and take care.